Hey everybody, Greg Frucci again here, the author of The Path of 300. This video series, Run Towards That Which Scares You, is going to be taking a little bit of a different track in this video. The last video, if you watched it, and you were offended by the language that you saw while I was at sea, I apologize for that, but that's who I was back then. This is video number 5. We're going to take a little bit of a different track in this video and the ones going forward. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever been visited by an animal or a bird and you kind of felt like they were trying to tell you something? Okay, yeah, I'm getting ready to dip into the woo-woo shit, and if you don't like the woo-woo shit, I'm sorry. Yes, I just did say woo-woo shit, didn't I? I can't help it. Just kind of bear with me, okay? I'm going to be telling a story today that I've spoken about in the past videos. There was a bird that came to see me while I was at sea, and maybe you can relate. I mean, if you're my age or older or maybe even younger. I mean, heck, I had something with a buddy of mine happen when I was in high school, and neither one of us could explain it. And we've only told the story to a few other people. I'm not going to mention his name, but Mike, if you're watching this, you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, beginning on day 2 of my attempted sail across the Atlantic Ocean. Again, I only made it towards Bermuda, and you've seen why if you watched the previous videos. But beginning day 2, I was maybe a little bit more than 100 miles off the coast of North Carolina. I was in the Gulf Stream, and I remember it was morning, and the sun was barely up, and there's a bird that just starts flying towards the mast. No big deal, right? It's a seabird, although I didn't know what it was, because the more I focused on it, it had a wingspan probably of about this wide, and was all white, had black markings on its underside, and this long tail, which actually turned out to be 2 tail feathers, but that long tail was as long as the bird was wide. So, you know, the bird body was like this, but the tail was a big bird. Sorry, I'm smiling because I'm thinking about a childhood television show. Anyway, so here comes this bird, right? He's flying to the mast of my boat, and you got to understand, I'm at sea, and I'm in the Gulf Stream, so the boat's going back and forth like this, so the mast is way up there, and it's going back and forth, and here comes this bird, and he's like, it looks to me like he's trying to land on the mast. I'm thinking, cool, well, you know, I mean, hope he gets to land on the mast. And he does this for like 10 or 15 minutes. And then he flies down to within maybe 10 feet of my head, and he's hovering and he's staring at me. Thinking, okay, like seagulls, and maybe you've been to the beach, and you know how they are. They'll beg, and they'll land up next to you, and they'll want food and whatever. So I'm thinking this guy wants some food. So I break out a loaf of bread, break off a couple of pieces, and I toss it to the bird. And it just goes right past him. He's just hovering and staring at me. That's kind of strange. The bread lands in the water. A different seabird, and I saw probably, I can't remember exactly, but there was like 4 or 5 different species of birds all the way to Bermuda. You know, I'm hundreds of miles out to sea, and there are birds out there. So the bread falls in the water. A different bird lands and grabs the piece of bread and takes off. And every other bird that I saw out there, all the way, they would just kind of fly by the boat, maybe, or just not even paying any attention to me at all. So while all this is going on, that bird is still hovering and staring at me for like 15 minutes. And then he flies around the boat a couple of times, comes back to that same spot, and again stares at me. No, I'm not hallucinating. This really happened. Actually, I got it on film, and maybe you've seen that film. So anyway, he flies around the boat again and then just takes off to the horizon. And I thought, okay. So he's going to the horizon, and then I'm looking at the horizon, and 8, 9, 10 miles away from me, I see a ship. And so I break out, they're called cold rigs. You look at them and you get out your binoculars and based on the lights and the position of the boat, you can tell what track it's taking, which is kind of important when you're out there in a really small boat and this big ass tanker is hauling ass and you don't want to hit it, or actually you don't want it to hit you, because if you hit it then ain't nothing left. And so anyway, he's flying directly to that ship, and I realize now I am, based on my calculations, I'm on a collision course with this ship. No big deal, it's daytime, right? So I just turn the boat and go behind it and keep on going down my merry way. The wild thing is, the next morning, and every single morning, all the way to Bermuda, I don't know if it was that bird, or if it wasn't, it was one exactly like it, would come visit me at the same time every single morning. And it would do the same thing. Come to my mast, not land on my mast, just kind of hover. Even on days when there was hardly any wind at all and I'm barely moving, he was just like hovering at the mast, and then he would come down to within 10 feet of my head and stare at me. And yeah, I began to have conversations with it. I think I may have even mentioned that in a couple of videos ago about talking to yourself. It's no big deal. Maybe that was the last video, I can't remember. So anyway, same deal, right? He flies around the boat, stops, stares at me, flies around the boat again, and then just takes off. Every single day, about the same time, all the way to Bermuda. Although on the last day at sea, my last full day at sea, I'm like 70 miles off the coast of Bermuda, 3 of them came to see me. And they all did the same thing. They were flying in formation. They flew around the boat and then stopped, all 3 of them, and stared at me. You're thinking, so what? Some birds were checking you out, dude. Okay, I get that. And I got that at the same time. I mean, I didn't even know what kind of bird it was at that point. I had no clue. So I get to Bermuda, and the first full day I was there, if you read my book, this whole story is in the book. Walking around Bermuda, I go into a pharmacy with the intention of getting a postcard to send it to a very good friend of mine back home. She still has the postcard, by the way. So I'm in there and I'm looking for a postcard, and there it is. There's a picture of the bird on the postcard rack. So I pick it up, I flip it over, and it's the Bermuda longtail, the national bird of Bermuda. Longtails, actually there's 6 species of that bird throughout the planet. This particular one, called the Bermuda longtail, has its own scientific name. I can't remember what it is. Anyway, that's its territory. They hang out in Bermuda, raise their young, and then they take to the sea, and they don't come back for another year. And then they raise their young in the cliffs around Bermuda and then take off again. So this bird stays at sea all year long. So I think what I'm going to do right now is, I'm having a moment. Sorry, I'm thinking about that bird. And I don't know if it was a male or a female. I don't know. And I don't think that it matters. But I'm going to insert some video of the bird right now so you can take a look at what I'm talking about, and then I'll take it from there. So, insert video. All right, so that's the longtail. You got to take a look at him a little bit. I actually wrote a poem about it too, and I think I'm going to put that at the very end of this video. It's called the Bermuda Longtail. Duh. So here's the coolest part of this story. So I had to leave my boat in Bermuda for 5 months. I think I've talked about that. So I'm in the cab, in a cab, riding to the airport to fly back to Wilmington, North Carolina, leaving my boat. And it was like a 25-minute drive from where I left the boat to the airport, right? And so, speaking of airports, there's a helicopter getting ready to fly over, so I think I'm going to stop the video right now. So anyway, yeah, I am in a cab ride on the way to the airport, and I get in the cab, and you got to remember, right? This is like, I'd been in Bermuda for 2 weeks. All of what had gone on the sail to Bermuda was still massively in my head. So the cabbie is a great man, ancient Bermudian. He's an older guy, and I get in the cab, and he just kind of looks at me and smiles, and just had this just very profound look on his face, and he just looks at me and says, "You sail in here?" And I looked at him and I was like, "Well, yeah, how'd you know that?" And we kind of joked around a little bit. He told me I looked a bit crusty, and I did. I've looked at pictures of myself back then, and I did look a bit crusty. Long story short, he asked me to tell him a story. So I told him the same story that I just told you. And he gets this smile on his face. And there was a long pause, and he said, "Is your father still alive?" And he's not. And I told him, I said, "Well, no, my father died fishing in the Atlantic Ocean in 2001. And it affected me, obviously." And there was a long pause again, and he said, "Well, what'd your father do?" I said, "Well, he was a fighter pilot in the Marine Corps. Career, 20 years. She said, "Oh, okay." There was a long pause again, and all this is in the book too, but he looked at me and he said, "So, do you know the meaning of the longtail?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, some of us Bermudians believe that the longtail carries the spirits of loved ones who have passed on in our lives." That was your father. So I know what you're saying. Some of you are probably going, "Yeah, right, whatever, Frucci, I'm turning off this video right now." Go ahead. But that moment sent a chill down my spine. And I was thinking about it this morning, right? There's been a lot of people that have taken to the sea. Men and women both. Just like I did. Some alone, some not alone. And the sea has taken some of them. And for some reason I was spared. Now you're going, "You're way dipping into the woo-woo stuff, Richie." I don't care. That's the kind of effect it had on me. To me, that bird was my father. And my sister. I'm going to pause the video just for a second. So here's what I've learned. Sometimes, whatever you want to call it, I don't care what religion you belong to. I don't care if you call yourself spiritual or non-spiritual or whatever kind of label you want to call yourself. I don't care. In a loving way. Because I'm not one who believes in labels. But so I'm just going to, for the sake of argument and for the sake of using the English language, I'm going to refer to it with a capital I as the universe. Because that's my choice. If you don't like it and you want to put a comment down there, go ahead. So sometimes we're given signs. And I believe the universe was giving me a sign. I believed that the universe was somehow, some way telling me that I was going to be protected. And I had an angel beside me. That's the way I interpret it. Yeah, I know. The old world paradigm is this. Everything can be explained. Do a mathematical equation and you can figure shit out. Yeah, well, if you're a scientist, you know that ain't true. The old world thinking is everything can be explained. Everything must be explained. I don't want to be freaked out. I'm just like, if something is happening, there is an explanation for it. So maybe let's dip into some different kind of thinking. So to me, the new thinking is humbleness. I mean, I used to be that way. I wanted everything explained to me. I'm a Virgo. And for those of you that understand what that means, everything's got to be like this, although we do wacky shit every once in a while. But yeah, we do. So seriously, just humble thyself to the universe. Not everything can be explained. That's just one thing that's happened to me. And I'm not going to talk about all of them. But think about it in your life. Think about moments in your life right now about experiences you've had that you can't explain. My guess is you've had them. And it's okay. It's kind of cool, actually. And we can be scared of things like that. Fear will rise up. I mean, I've had moments like that story that I referred to that happened to me when I was in high school. You know, I was 16, 17 years old. My buddy was about the same age, and we're walking through the woods at night, and all of a sudden, something happens, and it was scary. But we didn't get hurt. And there's been other things. On the way back from Bermuda to North Carolina, there were some other experiences that happened. And I'm going to talk about them. I crossed through the Bermuda Triangle. I know what you're thinking, because that's the way I used to be. Bermuda Triangle, pfft, whatever, dude. I read those books. That can all be explained. It's blah, blah, blah. Or you can go the other way and say, there's a big, giant crystal pyramid at the bottom of the sea, and it's crazy. I don't know. Whatever. But what I do know is while I was out there, stuff happened. And I'll talk about that in a different video. So what do? When stuff like that happens and you can't explain it and it's a little scary or whatever. Or you have a story that you want to tell somebody and then you get the nerve up to actually tell somebody the story, and they look at you like, I'm dialing 911 right now because you fucking crazy. Pardon my French. But those are the looks that you get. I've gotten those looks. I've told stories before to people that I won't tell stories like that again to, because they just... So you find like-minded people, just like I referred to in one of the other videos. There's stuff out there that we don't understand. That's a given. Try to imagine the limit of the universe. And then get back to me on that one when you figure it out. So, in the next video, and I appreciate you watching this, I appreciate you listening to, I mean, I can be a smart ass, right? I'm talking about the woo-woo shit, and I actually... Okay, so a falcon just flew over. That was kind of cool. Do the math on that one. So, sorry. So in the next video, I'm going to continue this series about certain events that I couldn't explain at sea. And this was occurring at a time in my life where I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do next. And to me, that's when this kind of stuff begins to happen. Right? We have an idea of what we think we want to do, but we're not quite sure, and we feel frustrated, and we feel overwhelmed, and we feel all of these things, and then we get a sign from something. That is exactly what happened to me. And I've had to flow with those signs because of where I was. Maybe that's part of the lesson that I needed to learn. Had I not been that far out there, by myself, alone, I would have just shut down, forgetting the sign, and walked away. But I didn't have a choice. I couldn't go anywhere. So that's what I'm hoping you're getting out of this. The next time something like that happens, think about it. Talk to somebody about it. Maybe there's meaning there. And for those of you that do understand, there's been a hawk that's come to visit me every single morning for the past 5 days. Till the next video, discover what your soul wants. And tell your ego to take a hike in a loving way. Peace to you.